Have you ever felt completely overwhelmed by life's challenges, as if an invisible force was relentlessly crushing you? This is a feeling many of us can relate to, but imagine living in a time when your entire community is under the brutal rule of an oppressive regime. This was the reality for the Israelites during the period of the Midianite domination. For 7 years, the Midianites, along with their allies, systematically ravaged the land of Israel, leaving its people destitute and demoralized. This cruel oppression led the Israelites to seek refuge in caves and mountain strongholds, desperate to escape the relentless onslaught. As they cried out in despair, it seemed their cries went unheard. This historical context sets the stage for the extraordinary story of Gideon, an unlikely hero whose journey from fear to faith offers timeless lessons for us all. The Midianites, like a swarm of locusts, would descend upon the land, destroying crops and stealing livestock, leaving the Israelites with nothing to sustain themselves. This was not just a physical devastation, but a spiritual and psychological one. The people of Israel were caught in a cycle of sin and suffering, repeatedly turning away from God and then seeking His help when their situation became unbearable. The Midianites' oppression was a direct consequence of Israel's disobedience, a harsh but effective reminder of the importance of faithfulness to God. This cyclical pattern of sin, suffering, supplication, and salvation is a recurring theme in the book of Judges, highlighting the merciful yet just nature of God. The Israelites' plight under the Midianites mirrors many of our struggles today. We might not be facing physical invaders, but we often deal with overwhelming situations that seem beyond our control. Financial crises, health issues, relationship problems, and more. Just as the Israelites built hiding places to escape their enemies, we too might find ourselves seeking refuge in temporary solutions, avoiding the root cause of our distress. However, Gideon's story reminds us that deliverance often comes in unexpected ways and through unexpected people. It encourages us to look beyond our immediate circumstances and trust in a higher plan, even when the odds seem insurmountable. As we delve into Gideon's journey, we'll see how an ordinary man, riddled with doubts and fears, was transformed into a mighty warrior under God's guidance. His story is not just a tale of ancient battles, but a powerful metaphor for our own struggles and victories. By examining his experiences, we can find inspiration and practical lessons to apply in our lives today. So, if you're ready to discover how faith can turn the tide in the most hopeless situations, keep reading. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories from the Bible. Desperation often leads us to seek help from higher powers, and the Israelites were no exception. Under the crushing weight of Midianite oppression, the Israelites cried out to the Lord for deliverance. This was not a mere whisper, but a collective, anguished plea for mercy. The severity of their suffering had reached a tipping point, compelling them to turn back to the God they had neglected. This moment of supplication was pivotal, as it set into motion a series of divine interventions that would change the course of their history. The cry of Israel serves as a reminder that even in our darkest moments, when hope seems lost, turning to God can open the door to miraculous changes. The Israelites' cry was born out of a profound realization of their own helplessness. For 7 years, they had endured relentless attacks, their resources depleted, and their spirits broken. The Midianites, with their superior numbers and tactical advantages, seemed invincible. Every harvest season, the Israelites faced the same grim reality. Their hard-earned produce would be stolen, leaving them on the brink of starvation. This recurring nightmare forced them to confront the consequences of their disobedience. Their cry to God was not just about seeking physical relief, but also a deep spiritual awakening, recognizing their need for divine intervention and guidance. This cry for help is something we can all relate to. In our own lives, we often wait until we are at our lowest point before seeking help. Whether it's pride, fear, or simply a lack of awareness, we tend to exhaust all other options before turning to a higher power. The Israelites' story teaches us the importance of humility and the power of collective prayer. It shows that acknowledging our weaknesses and asking for help is not a sign of failure, but a step towards healing and redemption. When we cry out to God, we open ourselves to His grace and mercy, paving the way for transformation. As we continue with Gideon's story, it's crucial to remember this foundational moment of supplication. The Israelites' collective plea for help set the stage for God's intervention through Gideon. This moment of turning back to God is a powerful testament to his readiness to hear and respond to our cries. It underscores the importance of maintaining a relationship with God, not just in times of crisis, but as a constant source of strength and guidance. Gideon's journey from this point forward is a testament to what can happen when we align ourselves with God's will and trust in his plan for our lives. In response to Israel's cry for help, God sent a prophet to deliver a powerful message. This unnamed prophet reminded the Israelites of their history, recounting the miraculous deliverance from Egypt and the many victories granted by God. However, he also pointed out their disobedience and the consequences they faced as a result. The prophet's message was clear. Their suffering under the Midianites was not due to God's abandonment, but their own unfaithfulness. This prophetic reminder served as a crucial wake-up call, urging the Israelites to return to their covenant relationship with God. The prophet's words were both a rebuke and a call to repentance. He highlighted how the Israelites had repeatedly turned away from God, adopting the practices and idols of the surrounding nations. This spiritual infidelity was the root cause of their suffering. The prophet's message emphasized that true deliverance would come not just through military victory, but through spiritual renewal. This dual focus on physical and spiritual liberation is a recurring theme in the Bible, reminding us that our external circumstances often reflect our internal spiritual state. The prophet's message was a call to realign their hearts with God's will. This prophetic intervention underscores the importance of accountability and self-examination. In our own lives, we may face challenges that seem insurmountable, but sometimes these difficulties are opportunities for introspection and growth. The prophet's message to Israel is a timeless reminder that we must be willing to examine our actions and their alignment with our values and beliefs. It teaches us that acknowledging our mistakes and seeking forgiveness is a powerful step towards transformation. The prophet's words were a catalyst for change, urging the Israelites to reflect on their past and make a conscious decision to return to God. The arrival of the prophet marked a turning point in Israel's story. It was a moment of divine intervention that set the stage for Gideon's emergence as a leader. This prophetic message was a reminder of God's enduring faithfulness and his willingness to restore his people if they turned back to him. As we continue to explore Gideon's journey, we see how this initial message of repentance and renewal paved the way for the miraculous events that followed. The prophet's call to return to God is a powerful lesson for us all, emphasizing the importance of maintaining a strong and faithful relationship with our Creator. In the midst of Israel's turmoil, a divine encounter took place that would change the course of history. Gideon, a seemingly ordinary man, was threshing wheat in a winepress to hide it from the Midianites when the angel of the Lord appeared to him. This encounter was both unexpected and profound. The angel addressed Gideon with the words, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." These words must have seemed ironic to Gideon, who felt anything but mighty. Yet, this greeting was a declaration of Gideon's potential and a glimpse into the extraordinary plan that God had for him. Gideon's initial reaction to the angel's greeting was one of skepticism and doubt. He questioned the angel, asking why all these calamities had befallen Israel if the Lord was truly with them. This honest expression of doubt and frustration is something many of us can relate to. In times of crisis, it's natural to question why certain things happen and to wonder about God's presence in our lives. Gideon's candid response reflects a deep-seated sense of inadequacy and confusion, yet it also sets the stage for a transformative dialogue with the divine messenger. The angel's response to Gideon's doubts was both empowering and reassuring. He instructed Gideon to go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. This command highlighted an important principle. God often calls us to act based on the strengths we already possess, even if we don't recognize them. The angel's message was a reminder that God sees potential in us that we may not see in ourselves. This divine affirmation encouraged Gideon to step out of his comfort zone and embrace the mission God had set before him. This encounter with the angel was a pivotal moment in Gideon's journey. It marked the beginning of his transformation from a fearful and doubtful individual to a courageous leader. The angel's message was not just about delivering Israel from physical oppression, but about igniting a spiritual awakening within Gideon. This divine encounter reminds us that God often meets us in our moments of fear and doubt, offering reassurance and guidance. It encourages us to be open to the unexpected ways in which God might speak to us and to trust in His plan for our lives, even when it seems daunting. Following the angelic encounter, Gideon faced a significant internal struggle. Despite the divine message, he still felt inadequate and uncertain about his ability to lead Israel to victory. Gideon expressed his insecurities by highlighting his family's low status and his own perceived insignificance. He questioned how someone like him could possibly save Israel. This candid admission of self-doubt is something many of us can relate to. When faced with daunting tasks, it's common to feel overwhelmed and unsure of our capabilities. However, Gideon's story teaches us that God's call often comes to those who feel least qualified. The angel's response to Gideon's hesitation was a powerful affirmation. "I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites, leaving none alive." This promise underscored the principle that God's presence and power can enable us to accomplish what seems impossible. The assurance of divine accompaniment is a recurring theme in the Bible, reminding us that we are never truly alone in our struggles. God's promise to be with Gideon was a crucial element in his journey, providing the confidence needed to embark on the mission ahead. Gideon's initial reluctance is a profound lesson in humility and dependence on God. Instead of relying solely on his own strength, Gideon was called to trust in God's power. This shift in perspective is essential for anyone facing seemingly insurmountable challenges. It teaches us that our limitations do not define us. Rather, it is our faith in God's unlimited power that determines our potential. Gideon's willingness to voice his doubts and seek reassurance highlights the importance of open communication with God. By acknowledging our weaknesses and seeking His guidance, we allow room for divine intervention. As Gideon began to accept his calling, he still sought confirmation of God's will. This desire for assurance led to the famous test with the fleece, where Gideon asked for a sign to confirm God's promise. This episode illustrates the human need for reassurance and the patience of God in providing it. Gideon's request for a sign was not an act of faithlessness but a sincere plea for confirmation. God's response to this request demonstrated His understanding of human frailty and His willingness to provide the reassurance needed to strengthen Gideon's faith. This part of Gideon's story reminds us that seeking confirmation from God is a natural part of our spiritual journey, and that God is patient with our need for assurance. Gideon, like many of us, was plagued with feelings of insecurity and self-doubt. Despite the angel's affirmations, he could not reconcile the idea of himself as a mighty warrior with his reality. Coming from the weakest clan in Manasseh and being the least in his family, Gideon saw himself as insignificant and powerless. This self-perception clashed sharply with the angel's declaration, leaving Gideon in a state of confusion and reluctance. His insecurity is a powerful reminder of how often we underestimate ourselves and let our perceived limitations define our actions. In response to Gideon's insecurities, the angel provided a profound reassurance. "I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites, leaving none alive." This promise was more than just words. It was a divine guarantee that Gideon's success did not depend on his abilities alone, but on God's presence and power. This reassurance speaks to a fundamental truth in our own lives. When we align ourselves with God's will, we are empowered to overcome obstacles that seem insurmountable. Gideon's journey from doubt to faith illustrates the transformative power of divine assurance. Despite this divine reassurance, Gideon's insecurities did not disappear overnight. He needed tangible proof of God's commitment to him. Thus, he asked for a sign, placing a fleece on the ground and requesting that it be wet with dew while the surrounding ground remained dry. This request was not born out of disbelief but a deep need for confirmation. Gideon's request for a sign reflects our own need for reassurance in times of doubt. It shows that seeking signs from God is not necessarily a lack of faith but a step towards deeper trust and understanding. God's response to Gideon's request was one of patience and understanding. He granted Gideon the sign he asked for, and then another when Gideon reversed the conditions of the fleece test. This divine patience underscores a critical aspect of God's nature, His willingness to meet us where we are, even in our doubts and insecurities. Gideon's experience teaches us that it is okay to seek reassurance from God and that He is patient with our process of building faith. This part of the story encourages us to bring our doubts and insecurities to God, trusting that he will provide the confirmation and strength we need. Gideon, still grappling with his doubts, decided to test the divine visitor with an offering. He prepared a young goat, unleavened bread, and broth, presenting them to the angel under the oak tree. This act of offering was not merely a test but a gesture of respect and submission, seeking a sign that the angel's words were truly from God. Gideon's choice to offer food was symbolic, representing sustenance and life. This offering set the stage for a miraculous confirmation that would strengthen Gideon's resolve and faith. The angel instructed Gideon to place the meat and bread on a rock and pour the broth over them. Then, the angel touched the offering with the tip of his staff, and fire flared from the rock, consuming the meat and bread. This miraculous display was a clear sign of divine approval and presence. The fire from the rock was not just a physical phenomenon but a powerful symbol of God's consuming power and acceptance of Gideon's offering. This moment marked a significant turning point for Gideon, transforming his doubt into conviction. Witnessing the miracle, Gideon realized that he had been in the presence of the angel of the Lord. Overwhelmed with fear, he exclaimed, "Ah, sovereign Lord, I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face." Gideon's reaction was one of awe and terror, recognizing the gravity of his encounter. This fear was rooted in the belief that seeing God or his angel face to face could result in death. However, the Lord reassured Gideon, saying, "Peace, do not be afraid. You are not going to die." This reassurance calmed Gideon's fears and solidified his understanding of God's protection and favor. In response to this divine encounter, Gideon built an altar to the Lord and named it, "The Lord is Peace." This act of building an altar was significant, serving as a physical and spiritual marker of Gideon's encounter with God. The altar symbolized not only the peace that Gideon received from God, but also his commitment to worship and obedience. This moment of altar building underscores the importance of creating spaces of remembrance and worship in our own lives. It reminds us to honor and commemorate the moments when we experience God's presence and power, reinforcing our faith and dedication. Following the divine encounter and the miraculous sign, Gideon received his first mission from God, to destroy his father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole beside it. This task was both dangerous and revolutionary, challenging the deeply ingrained idol worship within his community. By destroying these symbols of idolatry, Gideon was not only obeying God's command, but also taking a bold stand against the prevailing cultural and religious norms. This act required immense courage, as it directly opposed the practices and beliefs of his own family and community. Gideon, aware of the potential backlash, chose to carry out the mission under the cover of night. He took 10 of his servants and demolished the altar of Baal, cutting down the Asherah pole and using it to build an altar to the Lord. On this new altar, he sacrificed a bull as a burnt offering to God. This nocturnal act of defiance was a significant step in Gideon's transformation from a fearful individual to a courageous leader. It demonstrated his willingness to confront and dismantle the sources of idolatry and sin within his own household, setting an example for the entire community. The next morning, the townspeople discovered the destroyed altar and the sacrificial remains. Outraged, they demanded to know who had committed this sacrilege. Upon learning that Gideon was responsible, they confronted his father, Joash, demanding Gideon's execution. Joash's response was both surprising and wise. He challenged the townspeople, asking if they were defending Baal, a supposed god. Joash argued that if Baal were truly a god, he could defend himself. This argument not only saved Gideon's life but also exposed the impotence of the idols they had been worshipping. This confrontation marked a pivotal moment in the community's perception of idol worship. Gideon's bold action and his father's defense forced the people to question their beliefs and the power of their idols. As a result, Gideon earned the nickname Jerubbaal, meaning, "Let Baal contend with him." This new name symbolized Gideon's victory over idolatry and his role as a champion of God's cause. The destruction of Baal's altar was a powerful demonstration of God's supremacy and a call to the Israelites to return to true worship. This episode teaches us the importance of confronting and dismantling the idols in our own lives, challenging the false beliefs and practices that hinder our relationship with God. With the altar of Baal destroyed and his new name, Jerubbaal, Gideon began to rally the Israelites for the impending battle against the Midianites. The Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon, empowering him to take decisive action. He blew a trumpet, summoning the men of Abiezr to follow him. This call to arms was a significant step, signaling the beginning of a united effort to reclaim their land from the oppressive Midianites. Gideon's transformation from a hesitant individual to a decisive leader inspired those around him to join the fight. Gideon sent messengers throughout Manasseh, Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, calling on their warriors to gather for battle. The response was overwhelming, with men from all these tribes answering the call. This collective mobilization demonstrated the Israelites' readiness to stand against their oppressors and reclaim their freedom. It also highlighted the effectiveness of Gideon's leadership and the people's renewed faith in God's deliverance. The assembling of the troops was not just a military action, but a spiritual revival, as the people rallied under the banner of God's chosen leader. Despite the impressive turnout, Gideon still sought further confirmation from God. He asked for another sign, this time involving a fleece. Gideon placed the fleece on the threshing floor and requested that God make the fleece wet with dew while the ground around it remained dry. The next morning, Gideon found the fleece soaked with dew, confirming God's promise. However, seeking even greater assurance, Gideon reversed the test, asking for the fleece to remain dry while the ground was wet. God granted this second request as well, providing the confirmation Gideon needed. These signs with the fleece were significant not only for Gideon's faith but also for the morale of the Israelites. They reinforced the divine nature of Gideon's mission and reassured the people that God was indeed with them. This episode underscores the importance of seeking God's guidance and confirmation, especially in moments of great responsibility and uncertainty. Gideon's willingness to seek and receive God's signs illustrates a deep dependence on divine direction, a quality that is essential for effective leadership. This part of the story encourages us to seek God's guidance in our own decisions, trusting that He will provide the confirmation and support we need. As Gideon prepared to lead his army into battle, God had a surprising command. The army was too large. Despite the Midianite forces being vastly superior in number, God instructed Gideon to reduce his troops. The reason was clear. God wanted the victory to be unmistakably His, not attributed to the Israelites' strength. This divine strategy was meant to ensure that the Israelites would recognize their dependence on God and give Him the glory for their deliverance. This reduction of forces was a radical and counterintuitive move, testing Gideon's faith and the resolve of his men. Gideon announced to his troops that anyone who was fearful could leave. This announcement resulted in 22,000 men departing, leaving only 10,000. This initial reduction was a significant test of courage and commitment, weeding out those who were not fully confident in the mission. Despite this drastic decrease, God still considered the remaining force too large. He instructed Gideon to take the men down to the water and observe how they drank. Those who lapped the water with their hands to their mouths were separated from those who knelt to drink directly from the stream. Out of the 10,000, only 300 men lapped water with their hands. God told Gideon that with these 300 men, He would deliver Israel and give the Midianites into their hands. This final reduction was an extraordinary act of faith and obedience, as it left Gideon with less than 1% of his original army to face a vastly larger enemy. The selection of these 300 men was not based on conventional military criteria but on God's sovereign choice, highlighting His power and purpose. The reduction of Gideon's army teaches us profound lessons about faith and reliance on God. It shows that true victory does not come from numbers or human strength, but from God's intervention and guidance. This episode challenges us to trust in God's plan, even when it defies conventional wisdom and seems illogical. It encourages us to let go of our reliance on worldly measures of success and to embrace God's ways, which often involve stepping out in faith and trusting in His provision. Gideon's willingness to follow God's unconventional strategy set the stage for a miraculous victory, demonstrating the power of faith and obedience. Following his bold act of destroying the altar of Baal, Gideon was given a new name, Jerubbaal, which means, "Let Baal contend against him." This name change was significant, marking Gideon as a challenger to the false god Baal and a defender of the true God of Israel. It symbolized Gideon's newfound role as a spiritual leader who dared to stand against idolatry and lead his people back to faithful worship. This act of defiance against Baal not only defined Gideon's identity but also inspired the Israelites to reconsider their allegiances and the power of their idols. The townspeople's reaction to the destruction of Baal's altar was immediate and hostile. They demanded Gideon's death, holding him responsible for the sacrilege. This response highlighted the deep entrenchment of idol worship within the community and the potential dangers Gideon faced as he opposed it. However, Gideon's father, Joash, intervened with a clever argument. If Baal was truly a god, he could defend himself. Joash's logic not only protected Gideon but also cast doubt on Baal's power, causing the people to question their devotion to the idol. Joash's defense of Gideon was a pivotal moment, shifting the perception of idol worship in the community. By challenging the townspeople to let Baal contend for himself, Joash exposed the impotence of the false god. This public confrontation served as a catalyst for change, encouraging the Israelites to reconsider their worship practices and turn back to the true God. Gideon's new name, Jerubbaal, became a symbol of this shift, representing the victory of true faith over idolatry. This episode underscores the importance of standing firm in one's beliefs, even in the face of opposition and danger. The transformation of Gideon into Jerubbaal is a powerful testament to the impact of courageous faith. By obeying God's command to destroy the altar of Baal, Gideon not only changed his own life but also influenced his entire community. His actions sparked a spiritual awakening, challenging the Israelites to abandon their idols and return to God. This story encourages us to take bold stands for our faith, trusting that God will use our actions to bring about positive change. Gideon's journey from insecurity to leadership demonstrates that with God's guidance, even the most unlikely individuals can become powerful agents of transformation. With his new identity as Jerubbaal and the Spirit of the Lord upon him, Gideon was ready to mobilize the Israelites for battle. The first step was to rally the men of Abiezer, his own clan, by blowing a trumpet. This call to arms was a significant gesture, signaling the start of a united effort against the Midianites. The response was immediate and enthusiastic, with the men of Abiezer gathering to support Gideon. This initial mobilization demonstrated the trust and respect Gideon had earned through his previous actions and the divine endorsement of his leadership. Gideon did not stop with Abiezer. He sent messengers throughout the territories of Manasseh, Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, summoning their warriors to join the fight. The response was overwhelming, with thousands of men answering the call. This widespread mobilization indicated a renewed sense of unity and purpose among the Israelites. They were no longer willing to live under Midianite oppression and were ready to fight for their freedom. Gideon's leadership had instilled a new hope and determination in the people, uniting them in their common cause. As the troops gathered, Gideon faced a critical moment of decision. Despite the impressive turnout, he sought further confirmation from God, asking for a sign with a fleece. Gideon placed the fleece on the threshing floor and requested that it be wet with dew while the ground remained dry. The next morning, the fleece was soaked, confirming God's promise. However, Gideon, seeking even greater assurance, reversed the test, asking for the fleece to remain dry while the ground was wet. God granted this second request, providing the confirmation Gideon needed and reinforcing his faith. The mobilization of the troops was not just a military action but a spiritual revival. Gideon's leadership and the divine signs he received inspired the Israelites to trust in God's plan. This episode highlights the importance of seeking God's guidance in our endeavors, especially when facing significant challenges. Gideon's willingness to seek and receive divine confirmation illustrates a deep dependence on God, a quality that is essential for effective leadership. This part of the story encourages us to rely on God's direction and trust in His promises, knowing that He will guide us through our battles. As the Israelite army prepared for battle, God delivered an unexpected command to Gideon. The army was too large. Despite the Midianite forces being overwhelmingly superior in number, God wanted to ensure that the victory would be attributed solely to His power, not to the strength of the Israelite forces. This divine strategy required Gideon to reduce the number of troops, a task that tested his faith and the resolve of his men. By thinning the ranks, God aimed to demonstrate His sovereignty and ensure that the Israelites would recognize their dependence on Him for deliverance. Gideon announced to his troops that anyone who was fearful or afraid could leave. This initial call resulted in 22,000 men departing, leaving only 10,000. This significant reduction was a test of courage and commitment, filtering out those who were not fully confident in the mission. Despite this drastic decrease, God still considered the remaining force too large. He instructed Gideon to take the men to the water and observe how they drank. Those who lapped the water with their hands to their mouths were separated from those who knelt to drink directly from the stream. Out of the 10,000, only 300 men lapped water with their hands. God told Gideon that with these 300 men, he would deliver Israel and give the Midianites into their hands. This final reduction was an extraordinary act of faith and obedience, as it left Gideon with less than 1% of his original army to face a vastly larger enemy. The selection of these 300 men was not based on conventional military criteria but on God's sovereign choice, highlighting his power and purpose. This divine selection process emphasized that true victory comes from God's intervention, not human strength. The reduction of Gideon's army teaches profound lessons about faith and reliance on God. It shows that true victory does not come from numbers or human strength, but from God's intervention and guidance. This episode challenges us to trust in God's plan, even when it defies conventional wisdom and seems illogical. It encourages us to let go of our reliance on worldly measures of success and to embrace God's ways, which often involves stepping out in faith and trusting in His provision. Gideon's willingness to follow God's unconventional strategy set the stage for a miraculous victory, demonstrating the power of faith and obedience. As Gideon and his 300 men prepared for the battle, God provided a final confirmation of victory through an unexpected source, the dream of a Midianite soldier. God instructed Gideon to go down to the Midianite camp at night and listen to what the enemy was saying. Accompanied by his servant Purah, Gideon approached the camp and overheard a Midianite soldier recounting a vivid dream. In the dream, a loaf of barley bread tumbled into the Midianite camp, striking a tent with such force that it overturned and collapsed. The soldier's companion interpreted the dream as a sign of Gideon's impending victory, stating, "This can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon son of Joash, the Israelite. God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into his hands." This interpretation was not only surprising but profoundly encouraging for Gideon. Hearing the enemy's fear and their belief in his victory served as a divine confirmation of the success that awaited him. This revelation bolstered Gideon's confidence and reinforced the certainty of God's promise. This dream and its interpretation were significant for several reasons. Firstly, it demonstrated God's control over even the thoughts and dreams of the enemy, using them to convey his plans to Gideon. Secondly, it highlighted the psychological aspect of warfare, showing that the Midianites were already demoralized and fearful. This demoralization played a crucial role in the upcoming battle, as the Midianites' fear and confusion would contribute to their defeat. Gideon's decision to listen to God's instruction and seek out this confirmation exemplifies the importance of being attuned to God's guidance, even in unexpected ways. Returning to his camp with renewed confidence, Gideon rallied his men and prepared them for the attack. The dream's confirmation transformed Gideon's faith from hope to certainty, allowing him to lead his troops with unwavering conviction. This episode underscores the importance of seeking and heeding God's confirmations in our own lives. It teaches us that God can provide reassurance and guidance through various means, often in ways we might not expect. Gideon's experience with the Midianites' dream illustrates the profound impact of divine encouragement and the importance of being open to God's messages. With his confidence bolstered by the dream, Gideon devised a bold and unconventional battle plan. He divided his 300 men into 3 groups and equipped each man with a trumpet, an empty jar, and a torch inside the jar. This unusual strategy relied on surprise, psychological warfare, and the element of confusion. By creating the illusion of a much larger force, Gideon aimed to terrify and disorient the Midianite army. This plan was a testament to Gideon's innovative thinking and his trust in God's guidance, demonstrating that victory could be achieved through unconventional means. As midnight approached, Gideon and his men took their positions around the Midianite camp. At Gideon's signal, they blew their trumpets, smashed their jars, and revealed the torches, creating a sudden and chaotic spectacle. The noise and lights startled the Midianites, who awoke in panic, believing they were under attack by a vast army. The confusion was further amplified by the 300 men shouting, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon!" This unexpected assault caused the Midianites to turn on each other in the darkness, resulting in a frenzied and self-destructive retreat. The success of Gideon's strategy was immediate and overwhelming. The Midianites, already demoralized by the dream, were thrown into complete disarray. The combination of psychological terror and the element of surprise proved to be devastatingly effective. As the Midianites fled, Gideon and his men pursued them, capitalizing on their confusion and fear. This initial victory was a clear demonstration of God's power and the effectiveness of following divine guidance. Gideon's faith and obedience turned what seemed like an impossible battle into a resounding triumph. The beginning of the battle highlights several key lessons. It shows the power of innovative thinking and the importance of adapting to circumstances with creativity and faith. Gideon's unconventional tactics underscore that God's ways are often different from human expectations, and success can come through unexpected means. This episode encourages us to trust in God's guidance and be open to new strategies, even when they seem unconventional. Gideon's victory through faith, creativity, and obedience serves as an inspiring example of how divine wisdom can lead to extraordinary outcomes. With the Midianites in full retreat, Gideon called upon the men of Naphtali, Asher, and all of Manasseh to join in the pursuit. This call to arms rallied additional forces to chase the fleeing Midianites, ensuring that the enemy could not regroup or mount a counterattack. The pursuit was relentless, with Gideon's forces pressing the advantage and driving the Midianites out of Israelite territory. This phase of the battle was crucial in securing a decisive and complete victory, preventing the Midianites from posing any future threat. During the pursuit, Gideon sent messengers to the hill country of Ephraim, asking them to seize the waters of the Jordan River as far as Beth-bara. The men of Ephraim responded quickly, capturing the strategic fords and cutting off the Midianites' escape route. This tactical move was vital in trapping the remaining Midianite forces and ensuring their complete defeat. The Ephraimites also captured and killed 2 Midianite leaders, Oreb and Zeb, further demoralizing the enemy and solidifying the Israelites' victory. This cooperative effort among the tribes exemplified unity and coordination, key factors in their success. As the battle drew to a close, Gideon and his 300 men crossed the Jordan River, continuing their pursuit of the fleeing Midianite kings, Zebah and Zalmunna. Despite their exhaustion, Gideon's determination did not waver. When they reached the town of Sukkos, Gideon requested food for his weary troops, but the town's leaders refused, doubting his ability to capture the kings. Undeterred, Gideon pressed on to the town of Peniel, where he received a similar response. This rejection highlighted the lack of faith and support from some Israelites, contrasting sharply with the dedication of Gideon's men. Gideon's relentless pursuit culminated in the capture of Zebah and Zalmunna. Returning to Sukkos and Peniel with the captured kings, Gideon confronted the leaders who had refused to aid his men. He punished the elders of Sukkos and tore down the Tower of Peniel, demonstrating the consequences of their lack of faith and support. This final act of justice underscored the importance of unity and cooperation in achieving collective goals. Gideon's victory over the Midianites was not just a military triumph but a spiritual and moral victory, reinforcing the values of faith, obedience, and communal support. After the resounding victory over the Midianites, the Israelites, grateful and awed by Gideon's leadership, approached him with an extraordinary offer. They asked him to rule over them as king, along with his descendants, creating a hereditary monarchy. This offer was a significant moment, reflecting the Israelites' desire for stable leadership and their recognition of Gideon's pivotal role in their deliverance. However, Gideon's response to this offer was both humble and wise. He declined the kingship, stating, "I will not rule over you, nor will my son rule over you. The Lord will rule over you." Gideon's refusal of kingship was rooted in his understanding of God's sovereignty. He recognized that true leadership and authority belong to God alone, and any human ruler should be a servant of God's will. By declining the offer, Gideon affirmed the theocratic principle that the Lord was the ultimate ruler of Israel. This decision reflected Gideon's humility and his commitment to maintaining the spiritual integrity of the nation. His refusal served as a powerful reminder that human leaders should not seek personal power but should lead in accordance with God's guidance and purpose. Despite declining the kingship, Gideon made a request that would have unforeseen consequences. He asked for a share of the gold earrings collected from the plundered Midianites. The Israelites willingly gave these to him, and with this gold, Gideon fashioned an ephod, a sacred garment associated with priestly duties. However, this ephod became a snare for Gideon and his family, as the Israelites began to idolize it, treating it as an object of worship. This unintended idolatry led the people away from true worship of God, illustrating the danger of even well-intentioned actions when they distract from genuine faith. Gideon's creation of the ephod and its subsequent idolization underscore the complexities of leadership and the unintended consequences of our actions. It highlights the importance of constant vigilance and humility in spiritual leadership. Gideon's story teaches us that even the most faithful leaders can make mistakes and that we must always strive to keep our focus on God. This episode serves as a cautionary tale about the perils of misplaced devotion and the need to ensure that all acts of worship and leadership point directly to God, not to human-made symbols or objects. After the defeat of the Midianites, Israel enjoyed a period of peace that lasted 40 years. This era of tranquility was a direct result of Gideon's faithful leadership and God's deliverance. The 40 years of peace allowed the Israelites to recover from the devastation of Midianite oppression, rebuild their communities, and strengthen their faith. Gideon's role as a judge during this time was marked by a commitment to justice and righteousness, guiding the people according to God's laws. This peaceful period was a testament to the power of faith and obedience in securing lasting prosperity. Gideon's leadership during these 40 years extended beyond military victory. He acted as a spiritual and moral leader, helping the Israelites navigate the challenges of maintaining their faith in a period of peace. His decisions and actions were aimed at reinforcing the covenant relationship between Israel and God. However, the idolatry associated with the ephod he created remained a blemish on his otherwise exemplary leadership. This contradiction within Gideon's legacy serves as a reminder of the complexities and challenges inherent in human leadership, even when guided by divine principles. The peace that Israel enjoyed during Gideon's lifetime was not just a respite from external threats, but also an opportunity for internal growth and spiritual renewal. The people had the chance to reflect on their past mistakes, learn from them, and build a stronger, more faithful community. Gideon's story during this period underscores the importance of using times of peace to deepen one's faith and prepare for future challenges. It teaches us that true peace is not merely the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice, righteousness, and a strong relationship with God. As Gideon's life drew to a close, his legacy was a mix of remarkable faith and human fallibility. He had led Israel to an incredible victory and a long period of peace, demonstrating the power of trusting in God's guidance. Yet, the idolatry that emerged from his actions with the ephod served as a sobering reminder of the need for vigilance and humility. Gideon's story encourages us to strive for faithfulness and integrity in all aspects of our lives, recognizing that our actions can have far-reaching impacts. It calls us to honor God in both our victories and our mistakes, always seeking His will above our own. Gideon's death marked the end of an era of peace and stability for Israel. He passed away at a good old age and was buried in the tomb of his father Joash in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. His death was a significant moment for the nation, as it brought to a close a period of relative tranquility and strong leadership. Gideon's passing left a leadership vacuum that soon led to a return of chaos and idolatry among the Israelites. The transition after Gideon's death highlighted the fragility of human leadership and the Israelites' tendency to fall back into old patterns of disobedience. Despite his imperfections, Gideon's legacy was largely positive. He had led Israel through one of its most challenging periods, delivering them from the Midianites and restoring a sense of national identity and faith. His life and actions demonstrated the transformative power of faith and obedience to God. However, the return to idolatry after his death underscored the Israelites' ongoing struggle to maintain their commitment to God without strong, faithful leadership. This cyclical pattern of faith and failure is a recurring theme in the book of Judges, highlighting the need for consistent spiritual guidance and adherence to God's laws. The period following Gideon's death saw the Israelites reverting to the worship of Baal and other Canaanite deities. This return to idolatry was a stark contrast to the peace and faithfulness experienced during Gideon's lifetime. It reflected the deep-seated challenges within the Israelite community, including their susceptibility to cultural influences and their difficulty in maintaining a covenant relationship with God. The relapse into idolatry serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of steadfast faith and the dangers of complacency in spiritual matters. Gideon's story, from his humble beginnings to his pivotal role in Israel's history, offers profound lessons for us today. His journey from insecurity to leadership, his bold actions against idolatry, and the peace he helped secure all illustrate the potential for ordinary individuals to achieve extraordinary things through faith and obedience to God. However, his story also highlights the human tendency towards failure and the need for continual reliance on God. Gideon's life encourages us to seek God's guidance in all we do, to be vigilant against idolatry and complacency, and to strive for faithfulness in both times of peace and conflict. After Gideon's death, his son Abimelech emerged as a prominent figure, seeking to establish himself as ruler over Israel. Abimelech's rise to power was marked by ambition and ruthlessness, contrasting sharply with his father's humility and faithfulness. He went to his mother's family in Shechem and persuaded them to support his bid for kingship, arguing that it would be better for them to be ruled by one of their own. Abimelech's quest for power led to a brutal and bloody campaign, beginning with the murder of his 70 brothers, Gideon's other sons, to eliminate any potential rivals. Abimelech's actions were a stark departure from Gideon's legacy of faith and humility. His ruthless ambition and willingness to commit fratricide for the sake of power highlighted the dangers of unchecked ambition and the corrupting influence of power. Abimelech's rise to power was not sanctioned by God, and his leadership was marked by violence, treachery, and a lack of regard for justice. This contrast between father and son serves as a powerful reminder of the impact of leadership and the consequences of abandoning divine principles in pursuit of personal gain. The people of Shechem initially supported Abimelech, influenced by his familial ties and his promises. However, his reign was short-lived and fraught with conflict. God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the leaders of Shechem, leading to a breakdown in their alliance. This divine intervention highlighted the instability of Abimelech's rule and the inherent flaws in his quest for power. The ensuing conflict between Abimelech and the people of Shechem resulted in further bloodshed and chaos, demonstrating the destructive nature of leadership driven by selfish ambition rather than a commitment to God's will. Abimelech's story is a cautionary tale about the perils of ambition and the importance of righteous leadership. His rise and fall illustrate the consequences of abandoning faith and integrity in favor of power and control. Abimelech's actions brought suffering and division, contrasting sharply with the peace and unity achieved under Gideon's leadership. This episode serves as a stark reminder that true leadership is rooted in humility, faith, and a commitment to serving others rather than pursuing personal gain. It encourages us to evaluate the motives behind our actions and strive for leadership that aligns with divine principles. Abimelech's reign of terror eventually led to his downfall. The conflict between him and the leaders of Shechem escalated into open warfare. Abimelech's forces besieged the city, capturing and destroying it, and killing many of its inhabitants. However, this victory was short-lived, as Abimelech continued his campaign of destruction against other cities. His relentless pursuit of power and retribution created widespread instability and suffering. The destructive nature of his leadership became increasingly apparent, highlighting the unsustainability of rule based on violence and fear. The turning point in Abimelech's downfall came during the siege of Thebes. As Abimelech and his forces attacked the city's fortified tower, a woman dropped a millstone from the tower, striking Abimelech on the head and fatally wounding him. Realizing he was mortally wounded, Abimelech ordered his armor-bearer to kill him with a sword to avoid the disgrace of being killed by a woman. This inglorious end to Abimelech's life was a fitting conclusion to his ruthless and dishonorable reign. His death served as a divine judgment on his actions and a vindication of the justice that had been denied during his rule. The fall of Abimelech was a powerful demonstration of divine justice. Despite his efforts to secure power through violence and treachery, Abimelech could not escape the consequences of his actions. His death by a seemingly insignificant act, a millstone dropped by a woman, underscored the futility of his ambition and the ultimate supremacy of God's justice. This episode highlights the principle that evil and unrighteousness will eventually be judged and that true justice is in God's hands. It serves as a reminder that no matter how powerful or ruthless a leader may seem, they are ultimately accountable to God. Abimelech's downfall and the restoration of some semblance of order in Israel after his death provide a sobering conclusion to his story. It underscores the importance of righteous leadership and the devastating consequences of pursuing power for selfish ends. The story of Abimelech contrasts sharply with that of his father, Gideon, highlighting the difference between leadership rooted in faith and obedience to God and leadership driven by personal ambition and violence. Abimelech's life and death serve as a powerful lesson about the importance of integrity, humility, and reliance on God's guidance in leadership. Gideon's life and legacy offer a rich tapestry of lessons that remain relevant today. From his humble beginnings to his transformation into a mighty warrior, Gideon's story is a testament to the power of faith and obedience to God's call. His initial doubts and insecurities resonate with many of us, reminding us that God often chooses the most unlikely individuals to accomplish his purposes. Gideon's journey from fear to faith encourages us to trust in God's plans and to step out in faith, even when we feel inadequate or unprepared. One of the most powerful lessons from Gideon's life is the importance of obedience to God's commands. His willingness to destroy the altar of Baal and stand against idolatry, despite the personal risks, exemplifies true faith and courage. This act of obedience not only marked the beginning of his leadership but also set a powerful example for the Israelites, challenging them to abandon their false gods and return to the worship of the true God. Gideon's story teaches us that true worship requires bold actions and unwavering commitment to God's principles. Gideon's leadership during the battle against the Midianites highlights the importance of innovation and reliance on God's guidance. His unconventional strategy, inspired by divine instruction, led to a miraculous victory against overwhelming odds. This episode encourages us to seek God's direction in all our endeavors and to be open to unconventional solutions that align with his will. Gideon's success demonstrates that when we trust in God's guidance, even the most daunting challenges can be overcome through faith and obedience. Finally, the legacy of peace that followed Gideon's victory and the subsequent return to idolatry after his death underscore the importance of consistent and faithful leadership. Gideon's life illustrates the impact that one faithful individual can have on a nation, but it also highlights the fragility of human commitment to God. The cycles of faithfulness and failure in Israel's history remind us of our own tendencies to stray from God's path and the need for continual vigilance and reliance on his grace. Gideon's story calls us to remain steadfast in our faith, to seek God's guidance in all things, and to lead lives that honor and glorify him.